Rep. Susan Wild. Congresswoman, good morning.
Good morning, Julie. Nice talking to you.
Really great to have you on the show. Can you give us your perspective on what happened this week on the two-track infrastructure and $3.5 trillion spending?
Sure, happy to. Well, I know that the committees are, now that they've been given the green light because we've passed the rule, the committees are all hard at work at creating their portion of the bill, which will all eventually have to come together, but not this week, into a final bill. So there will be a lot of committee work over the next week. Education and Labor has already scheduled some hearings on what we want to include in there, and everybody's going to be hard at work.
Now, in an interview with the Washington Post, you said you'd come around on the idea of doing those two bills together. But what realistically are the prospects for this social spending bill that Biden wants?
So I think what's going to happen is that we are going to see both bills come forward. I do think that the social infrastructure or soft infrastructure portion is going to be considerably smaller than $3.5 trillion. That is because a lot of people, myself included, are worried about that number. But there are some really important priorities that have to be in that social infrastructure piece, and I believe that will make it. So I think we're going to have to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure deal as promised on September 27th, I think. I think that will pass. There will have to be some massaging of people. And then I expect that we will proceed fairly quickly and have a vote on the social piece, which we don't yet know what it's going to look like.
What are some of your priorities in the spending bill? What do you think needs to get done?
Oh, thank you for asking. My number one priority, quite honestly, is the expansion of Medicare, and specifically, and also even more particularly, the Medicare's ability to negotiate prescription drug prices, which I want to say for everybody listening would not just affect senior citizens who are on Medicare. It would actually bring down drug prices for everyone. Drug pricing, it has been my number one priority in Congress. My district is afflicted with a whole lot of people with asthma and diabetes who pay a lot of money for inhalers and insulin, and it's something that I hear about almost daily. So that, I think, is a really important piece of it. But one of the really important things to know is that also becomes part of the pay-for, as we call it in Congress, part of the pay-for all of the infrastructure bill. Because if you can reduce prescription drug prices that are being paid by Medicare, and Medicare, of course, is paid for with taxpayer dollars, well, guess what? That results in an immediate savings that can then be applied to some of these other terrific priorities in the social piece, including child care, which I really do believe is long overdue to be addressed in this country, and of course, broadband, which I don't even think should be considered part of the soft infrastructure. I think it should be considered part of the hard infrastructure bill. So there are so many priorities that we have, but the good news is that we have a lot of ways to pay for them in terms of cost savings.
You also took a leadership role on canceling student debt for people with disabilities. Can you tell us about that? Do you see that as a beginning, or is that where it ends on student loan forgiveness?
Oh, I see it as a beginning. And I'm not, by the way, I don't want anybody to construe that as saying I think we should cancel all student loan debt. I'm not at that point. What I do believe is that the disabled in this country are finally being seen. And maybe that's the result of, record numbers of job openings that are not going filled. That's the cynical part of me, thinking that employers are finally realizing that hiring the disabled is a good idea. I spent, I think it was last week, in my district at a place called the Clubhouse in Lehigh County, and its number one mission is to get adults with disabilities, employment. And I spent an afternoon with people who are delightful and smart and anxious to be productive, but have been held back in so many ways, chief among which are housing and the cost of their education. And I think that to help this segment of society get ahead by forgiving their student loan debt, which, by the way, you have to think about what a challenge it would be to go for higher education. Higher education is a challenge anyway, but if you add to that being disabled, whether you're in a wheelchair or you have a learning issue or a mental health issue or something else, and you still persevered and gotten your higher education degree, let's help these people really become productive members of society, which is exactly what they've wanted for decades, and this would just be a huge boost to them.
And you really see the culture changing on that?
Yes, I do see the culture changing on that. I see it in my own district. I see more and more disabled people in places of employment, and I'm not just talking about stocking the bananas at the local grocery store, but in much more productive. And by the way, shout out to the grocery stores. And
yeah, no disrespect to the stockers.
Shout out to them for having employed a number of disabled people over the years. But now we are seeing more and more opportunities come up for these folks, and I think that the dignity that would be afforded to them by not having to deal with their student loan debt would be tremendous. And I mentioned before the challenges that they have with housing, which is a huge issue across our country, generally affordable housing. But for the disabled, one of the things I came to learn as I started to work with them here in my district, the most affordable housing tends to be row homes, often rundown row homes in my district. Row homes are tight and narrow and have lots of steps and multiple floors. Well, if you're somebody that has a problem with steps, that's not going to be a very good fit for you. And so they have to spend so much money to find accessible housing that the relief that would be afforded by not having this additional student loan debt would be tremendous.
And it has seemed like President Biden hasn't been super keen on forgiving student loan debt. I mean, he seems to be brought along very reluctantly on that issue.
Well, the president has a lot of priorities in front of him, and I think that it may in part be political. There is certainly a lot of noise about, well, I paid my way to get through college or higher ed, whatever. Why should this person get free college? Let me say this, where I do think the president has very forward-thinking ideas, and his Secretary of Education, Cardona, who I was just with 2 weeks ago here in my district, I think they are very forward-thinking on community college and having free community college. And for me, that's huge. I don't mean for me personally, I mean for my district. We have two of the best community colleges in the country, right here in District 7. We were at one of them the other last 2 weeks ago. The range of programs that they offer, the students that they are graduating, a lot of them go on to a traditional four-year college. A lot of them stop with community college and go out and have really terrific, productive careers, because community colleges can pivot so quickly to meet the needs of the local employers and national employers. And it happens all the time. Our community colleges are constantly developing brand new programs that are directly responsive to the needs of employers in the district. So I think the idea of free community college is where it's at. I think that we make sure that we are supporting these community colleges and their students, that we are expanding Pell Grants or giving free community college, which I would like to see even more, so that we can build our workforce. Because right now, that's what we really need. And I'm always hearing from employers and industries about how we just don't have enough workers. Well, the best place to start getting more workers is both with the disabled community and with the community.
My guest is Congresswoman Susan Wild. She's a Democrat of Pennsylvania, representing the state's 7th Congressional District in the Lehigh Valley and Philly exurbs. Congresswoman, can you give us a little idea of what the Democratic Party conversations are like about the debt limit fight coming up? What's the plan?
Well, the plan is to get it increased. We cannot we've got too many priorities that are happening right now that I don't know the exact plan for it, but there is we expect a lot of pushback from our Republican colleagues because, of course, they are the minority party, so they're going to oppose everything that we do. But I don't think there's any question that the things that we are working on in Congress that have increased the debt are things that are going to pay for themselves. And it's not going to, I'm not talking about over 30 to 50 years. I'm talking about things that are really going to increase our GDP in a short period of time if we can get these things done.
Really interesting.
That's the prevailing sentiment in my caucus.
But no one's talking about government shutdown or anything like that.
We will do everything possible to avoid government shutdown. I came into Congress in the last few weeks of 2018 because I was elected in a special election. So after November, whatever it was, November 6th, I think, when I got elected, I very quickly was sworn in and started serving. And so my very first experience in Washington was that we shut down the government. And then the rest of my class came in January in the midst of a shutdown government. So, needless to say, and it was chaotic, and we were in Washington. There were no federal offices open because the government had been shut down other than ours because the legislature always, as I learned then, always conveniently makes sure that they are funded. And so we were there, but, there were no cleaning people, no cafeteria workers, that kind of thing. So we don't want to see that happen again. And I say all of that lightly. There are much more important aspects to why we cannot shut down the government. The first thing that my district office staff was tasked with was all of a sudden people weren't getting their Social Security checks. People were freaking out about their IRS refunds, which some people literally live for, or count on at the beginning of every year. They file their taxes early so they can get just all kinds of things. Veterans benefits were affected. I have a family in my district that's a Coast Guard family, and the Coast Guard is the only branch of the military that doesn't continue to get paid during a shutdown. Some kind of weird rule there. So my very first bill that I introduced in Congress was to ensure that the Coast Guard would continue to get paid during a shutdown. Fortunately, the shutdown ended before we ever got to pass that bill. I'm hoping I don't have to resurrect it.
Congresswoman,
there's just no appetite for a shutdown.
Susan Wild is Congresswoman from the Keystone State 7th Congressional District. You can find her on Twitter at Rep. Susan Wild. Congresswoman, thank you so much.